Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 8 and the last part of the academic research series. So, in this tutorial, we are going to see how, as a researcher, you can actually ruin your reputation. Now, obviously, I don't want you to ruin your reputation. That is why you need to know the rules of the game and you need to know what many of the researchers are actually making mistakes in. So, let's dive in. The first thing is aiming for easy and useless publications. Now, I've seen too many researchers try and do this, and people don't really take them seriously. That's the truth. Now, if you want to be a very average researcher, just want to climb the academic ladder, maybe this is the path for you. But if you want to be great, if you want to do something exceptional for the community and for yourself, then I would definitely tell you not to do this kind of thing. Let's see a little bit more. First of all, why would you actually chase easy publications if you already know that doing this will result in people not taking you seriously and you becoming an average researcher? Then what would you actually do it? There are actually some reasonable reasons for this. So first thing is, if you are an early career researcher, like you are just beginning and maybe you're applying for some PhD position or some master's thesis position, then maybe you are thinking in your mind that weak publications are better than no publication. So maybe you have a friend who is working on something great, but he doesn't have any publication. But you are working on some average things, which, people can live without. They don't really need you to do these things to advance science. But still, you have maybe three publications. So you may be thinking that it's better. And actually, it is. There are many people in many organizations who actually believe that this guy has publications and so he's better than the other guy who doesn't have any publication. But this is a mistake, and researchers who are actually great in their field understand what is the bullshit and what is the real thing. So, if as a researcher you feel that, it's a great work and it is taking time, what you can do is you can simply archive or bioarchive your work, your preliminary work, so that the people or the organization in which you're applying to sort of understands that this is the great work that you are doing, right? We talked about archiving and bioarchiving in one of my previous tutorials, so do check those other tutorials out. The next thing is to climbing up the academic ladders. So, this is not for early career researchers, rather, this is for people who are already in academia, who are acting as a professor of some sort. So, many institutions are there which have some sort of publication requirements if you want to actually get promoted to higher positions. And also there are institutions who impose some termination contract if certain number of publications do not take place every year. So maybe this requirement is three for some institutions. So if you are not publishing at least three papers per year, then your contract will be terminated and you cannot extend it anymore. In that case, even if you feel that you want to do some great research, always that time clock will go inside your mind and you will feel that, okay, let's first make three easy publications and then we can actually think about the great and hard works. This is just like a rat race. So basically, every year you will think of this, and when you reach that requirement, you will sort of become relaxed, and then you will not have the hunger for actually those great publications. That is precisely what's happening here. The next thing is academic institutions chasing publications. Now, this is directly related to the previous point. So, the restrictions and the rules are actually imposed by the academic institutions themselves. They do that because universities also want to get themselves ranked on top in different ranking systems. Two of them I can name is QS ranking, time series education ranking, and there are like many others. Now, obviously, if they are on top of those rankings, or maybe they are up there, then they can very easily advertise them to the students so that they get admitted in their university or in their colleges. Now, in order to make the rankings very generic across different fields, many of these ranking systems simply count the number of publications made. So it's just quantity. Because if you want to put a publication impact onto the weighing scale, then actually publication impact is different for different fields, different domains, etc. It becomes much more hectic to do those things, and then the rankings very hard to standardize those rankings across different domains, different fields, different universities. So many of them simply just count number of publications, and so in order to get up in the rankings, the academic institutions also impose great emphasis on the number of publications, quantity over quality. And finally, we have the we have the psychological pressure called the peer pressure. So if you see that your colleagues or your peers have published more than 5 research papers last year, but you are yet to submit even a single paper in a journal and will probably need 6 more months with the work you are doing, and automatically you feel that you are doing nothing and you really feel exhausted. And that's when some easy publication chasing comes into being. So the consequences I've already mentioned those. For example, real experts will not take you seriously. And if the research organization where you are actually applying to get hired, I mean, if that organization is really impactful, then they will not hire you. That's for sure. And also, if you are trying to apply for big grants for some highly impactful work, you will not get it because the grant people will see the list of your publications and they will see that you don't really do deep works. And finally, as a researcher, you are not going to acquire any real skills because you are just there doing the easy works. So, which publishing should we avoid targeting? So, suppose now you're really serious and you think that, okay, I really want to be great and you want to avoid these easy targets. So, I mean, what do I mean by easy targets, by useless publications? Like, how do you identify them? So, the first thing is you need to know about predatory journals. So, yes, the name is actually predatory because they literally make their websites so that young researchers, inexperienced researchers, or researchers who feel the necessity to publish more papers actually go in and submit their paper in these journals. So first of all, these some of these journals will guarantee publication if you pay the APC, the article processing charge. So it's basically money for publication, not quality for publication. The next thing is some of these journals guarantee peer review process within 1 week, which is quite impossible because experts in the field are really busy people and you cannot give them 1 week and expect to get reviews from them within 1 week. And this is, I think, the big sign of a predatory journal because the journal will probably not be indexed in Scopus or Web of Science or PubMed. So it's not indexed in any of these indexing databases. So the journals are called predatory for another reason because these journals themselves will constantly send you emails to, I mean, and they will pursue you so that you sort of publish your paper in the journal. That is why they are predatory. They prey on your papers. If you see a journal whose name starts with International Journal of something, it's probably a predatory journal. I mean, not all. There are journals whose name starts with International Journal of blah blah blah, and those journals are reputed in the field. But most journals which start with this kind of name are predatory. So if you see this kind of name, first of all, check I mean the details and everything, the indexing and all, and then decide if you want to submit or not. Then comes the low impact journals. So I have done this before. I mean, I myself have submitted papers in low impact journals and conferences before at the start of my career, thinking that publications are actually better than no publication. Okay. So, I mean, I was also in the same fallacy. So I hope that people learn from my mistakes here as well. So how do we know if a journal is low impact or not? First thing is the journal is mainly publishing papers from their own institution. Let me give an example. Suppose you are from University X. University X has a journal called University X blah blah blah. So if you are only publishing your papers in the University X journal belonging to University X, then you are basically targeting a low impact journal because you know that you cannot publish outside of an institution, and so in order to get promotion, you are actually publishing in a journal which belongs to your own institution and somehow you are affiliated to that institution itself. Next thing is if the journal is Q3 or Q4 ranked in the journal quartile. So again, if you want to know more about this, feel free to check out my previous tutorials. I have talked about in detail about impact factor, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, site score, SJR score, H index, and many other things. So if they're Q3 and Q4, they fall in the last 50% of the journals in the field. And so probably if you can, you should probably avoid them if your work is great. And also if the journal has a low H index, it also indicates that the journal isn't great. Low means less than 20. Impact factor of less than 1 is also low impact. So before I move on to low quality conferences, I also want to mention one thing. Suppose your original target was to publish in a very good journal, but for some reason you could not get your expected results, or maybe the big journals are not really thinking that your paper is very relevant or very recent or something like that. So basically, you have tried a lot, but you couldn't publish in the high impact journals. Then it is good to go to the low impact journals. Okay, so your first target should not be to publish in a low impact journal. Your first target should be ideally to publish in high impact, but if you fail somehow, then you go to low impact. And definitely avoid predatory journals. Okay, no matter what the cost is. So predatory journals will always actually harm your career. Finally, we go to low quality conferences. Now, again, I mean, if you look at most of the fields, apart from AI and machine learning, conferences are not regarded that important. It's just for sharing ideas. But if in your field, such as if you are a person from AI and machine learning, or maybe some other fields of computer science, or maybe in some other fields where conferences are regarded as important, then this is important for you. You should submit your work ideally into high quality conferences. So how do you identify low quality conferences? First of all, it is not available in ranking by the famous conference ranking institutions in the respective field. For example, for computer science, if you simply search in Google top conferences in computer science, you are going to see a big list of like 400 conferences. If the conference is not in that list, then please avoid submitting a paper there. Next thing is, these conferences are also sort of predatory. They will keep sending you spammy invitations for submission via email. So if you see that kind of trend, then maybe you want to avoid that conference. Then in such conferences, there will be no proper peer review, because when you actually see the review report of those conferences from the reviewers, you are going to see very generic review. Like, for example, code is not good, or paper needs more depth, this kind of thing, which has no merit whatsoever. There is no real expertise of the field in the reviewer comments. So you sort of know that these reviews are actually bullshit. They don't mean anything and the reviewers don't know anything. So they are typically from the low quality conferences. Finally, these conferences holds only virtual events, maybe via Skype. I mean, Skype is no more, I'm sorry, Zoom or Google Meet or something like that. They almost never will arrange a real life on-site conference. That is also a big no-no for you. And finally, if the conference is not affiliated with any reputed academic society, such as ACM or IEEE or ISCB, I mean, there are a few more, then you should avoid those conferences. Okay, these are all red flags for the conference. Now we are going to talk about research ethics. Now the thing is, if you publish a paper in predatory journal, in low quality journal, or in low quality conference, it is not an unethical thing to do. It is still ethical to publish in these journals or these conferences. It will just, I mean, make you an average researcher, and it will help you lose the importance from true actual like heavyweight researchers of the field. That's the only thing. But research ethics is different. If you don't follow research ethics, then it can harm your career, it can destroy your career as well. So there are three things you need to know, three keywords you need to know about research ethics. I'm going to take you through them one by one. Number one is plagiarism. So there are different types of plagiarism. Let me explain this. Number one is direct. So if you just copy paste from another paper into your own, that is plagiarism. So it is the most evident form of research unethical behavior. Then paraphrasing. Suppose you are discussing some ideas or some algorithms or some methods in a paper, but that method was already published in some other work. It's not your idea, but you are simply paraphrasing or like rephrasing the sentences of that paper such that people feel that this is your own idea. If you do that, then that is plagiarism, unless you actually cite that paper. So if you cite the actual paper so that people know that this idea is actually from that cited paper, that is okay. But if you are not citing, and if you are explaining some idea which is actually already published in a paper before, then that is actually plagiarism. Next thing is data. So if you are using someone else's experimental data or figures as your own without giving them proper credit, citation, etc., that is plagiarism. Then idea, it is a very important thing. So as I said before, different conferences are there where people simply submit abstract and talk about the preliminary idea or preliminary results of their work. If you are in that conference and if you take that idea, do some small experiments and try to publish the idea, that is also plagiarism, because you are actually stealing the idea of some other people. Finally, we have self. So you have some work done, you have some experiments done, you have actually submitted that work in some journal. If you submit the same work simultaneously in some other journal, that is not allowed. Also, suppose your work is already published in a journal. Now you are trying to take some experiments from that work, you are putting that in a new work, and you are trying to make a new publication. That is also plagiarism. It is less severe, but it is still plagiarism, and it is called self-plagiarism of the work. If you want to discuss some idea published in your previous paper, you need to cite your previous paper in your work and then discuss the idea. Then that will not be counted as plagiarism. So plagiarism is basically the most evident form of research unethical behavior, and you will probably surely get caught one day or another. And so this is a no-no for you as a researcher, especially if you're an early career researcher. Next thing is fabrication. I think this is the biggest con or biggest harm in research. I will explain why, but let's first explain what fabrication really is. The first thing is fake data. If you are creating numeric data or an Excel file, which were never really observed. I mean, you can create an Excel file, right? You can create a few columns and a few tables, etc. If those are fakely generated, then that is fabrication. If you are doing experiments, I mean, that is obviously part of the research to do experiments, but if you just completely ignore the experiment, say you are saying that, okay, I'm not going to do the lab procedure because maybe it's too costly or maybe you don't have the appropriate equipments to do the experiment, and you simply report lab procedure or survey that never took place in the first place, it is fake experiment. So it's a complete blunder or complete lie. So you are actually discussing a large paragraph where you discuss about lab procedure or survey, but you never really carried that out. Then that is fake experiment. There are fake figures. So you can generate some graph or plot with self-invented data, which you never really observed. That is going to be fake figures. So fabrication has no forgiveness. It is definitely an intentional fraud because you are literally making up data, making up experiments, making up figures. So the punishment for this is actually very extreme. It can end your career as well. Next, and the last one is called falsification. So as I said, fabrication is inventing new data, making up new data. Falsification is simply altering or changing existing data. So if you have some table, Excel table or something like that, and you see that your hypothesis or your initial thought is not being completely represented by those values, and you decide to change maybe 2 or 3 values to actually make your results look good, that is called falsification. Also, there are manipulating images falls in this category as well. So if you adjust figures to hide undesired results, for example, in your figure, there are some maybe outlier points, and you remove those outlier points to make the results look good. That is also falsification. Talking about outliers, I mean, people often do this, people often delete data points that make the paper claims look weak. I mean, obviously, there will sometimes in our experiments, there will be some data for which our method is not working well. So if we remove that experiment or that data, then that is also falsification. So the first thing I want to mention to these 3 things, I should say, removing data, altering data, manipulating images, is that they are not really easy to actually catch, right? I mean, if the data is from your own organization, how would people know whether you have removed some data or not, whether you have changed some data, or whether you have altered some images? There is actually little to no way to actually tell this. That is why this is, I think, the most widespread research unethical behavior that is prevalent now. And it makes the scientific community cripple because then people sort of have a false sense of some hypothesis, start the experiments with their hypothesis and fail at the very end. Destroys the productivity of science. Finally, we have misreporting of experimental settings. So maybe you are claiming that your experiment was run on the standard settings, which you actually, proposed in your work. But actually, that experiment was run on some custom settings, which you had to make manually in order to get better results. That is basically misreporting of experimental settings and falls inside falsification. So this is not fabrication again. This is changing real data and not removing them. And sometimes it can be an honest mistake because sometimes what happens is when you do the data entry, you can make some mistakes. When you work on the images, when you generate plots, there can be mistake in your code and then some outliers or some things can actually get excluded. Those things can happen. And that is why falsification is very hard to identify because even if someone gets caught, he can actually make some claims which actually show that it was an unintentional mistake. That is why this is so prevalent in the community. And we need to do something about getting rid of it. So let's now discuss about the outcomes of these unethical research practices. So first of all, let's start with plagiarism. So if you're plagiarizing, you can lose your scholarship, grant, or degree as a whole. So suppose you are doing PhD and your PhD thesis is sort of plagiarized from some other sources. Your PhD can be revoked. Then, I mean, if you're plagiarizing other people's work, then they can actually impose law on you, the copyright law, and that can actually make your life quite miserable. It will definitely destroy your research credibility and your plagiarized paper will be retracted or removed from the journal or the conference, and on your name that retraction record will be there. So this is very severe. Then we go to fabrication, which is the thing I despise the most. So if you fabricate your data, then it is impossible to reproduce your reported results. That's the first thing. It is also harmful to public because if your reported results have real life applications, say you are working with cancer related research and you report some findings which are not true, which are fabricated, then people may actually develop medicines on your findings, and then that medicine can actually destroy public health. And this is one of the main reasons for slowing down scientific progress, because some people who believe in your research will try to use the work to actually improve their own work and will fail. And it can happen to thousands of people, and then thousands of people have wasted thousands and millions of hours which they could be productive in. If you do fabrication and get caught, your research career will probably end. That's the truth. Falsification is just a minor version of fabrication, as I said before. So normally punishment is also less severe and the probability of getting caught is also less severe. But again, it destroys the productivity of scientists because also it makes reproducibility almost impossible. So try to avoid all these three at all times during your research practice. That is the end of the video for today. Hope you have enjoyed the entire series. And if you like the content, if you like the video, make sure to make some donation as well to support our channel, which the link of which is in the description. And also make sure to share and subscribe to our channel. Hope to see you with some other series someday. Thanks very much.